There we go.
Welcome to the Church of Mabus radio show. It's Friday night, coming at you live, United Public Radio. And also, let's see, a few things I need to plug. You can check out the UFO Paranormal Radio YouTube channel. That's twice saying UFO Paranormal Radio. So you can go there and check it out and subscribe. There's also a UFO Gods and Extraterrestrials YouTube channel. Check that out. UPRN is on Twitch, Twitter, iTunes, SoundCloud, and iHeart. And one other thing, bestfriends.org. It's Best Friends. It's an animal shelter place that helps animals from, killing them, and like a no kill shelter situation. It's called Best Friends. I think it's, let me make sure that's the right, is it bestfriends.org? Because I wrote it down. Yeah,
Somewhere.
bestfriends.org. Check that out and, donate, help them out. It helps animals. The last thing I need to plug, Ozark Mountain UFO Conference, April 8th through 10th, 2022, Best Western End of the Ozarks, Eureka Springs, Arkansas. That's the Ozark Mountain UFO Conference. And I believe this time it's not going to be online. It's going to be at the place. So April 8th through 10th, 2022. Wear your play doctor outfits. And no. I'm sure that would be interesting. But tonight's guest, Scott Taylor, Dr. Scott Taylor, great to have you here. How you doing, Scott?
I'm just great, Jeffrey. Thank you for inviting me. And
And
you too, Wham.
You're welcome.
Wham just went through like a winter storm from hell and water in the bathtub. And, she just went through a survivalist off the grid
Yep.
situation up in Hudson Valley with that superstorm that went through there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in Florida, so it,
Yeah.
it rained here a lot, but I didn't get it like she did. That's for sure.
Yeah. We didn't have electricity for almost 5 days. So it was, just got internet back. So I'm here finally.
And
Ooh, sounds chilly.
Oh, it was, well, yeah, it was one of those storms where it all happens and then it like the temperatures plunge. Like the each night for like the next 4 nights, it was like almost zero or below. I mean, it was ridiculous. So,
Yep. I grew up in Minnesota, so I feel your pain.
yeah, yeah.
I had a Hurricane Michael down here, which would be kind of like the tropical opposite of that. When that happened,
I remember that very well. You trapped in your mobile home.
yes, basically with the dog in the bathtub and a Bible and freaking out, and it went over the eye, and I thought it was gone, but I went outside and I was standing in the eye, and luckily I had sense enough to go in very quick, but it was terrible. It was definitely bad, but luckily we survived those events and hopefully no more anytime soon. But Scott, just to give you a little background, I said this before. When I was 17, testicular cancer, and then a year or so later, my dad passed, and it was just a lot. So I started seeking different, spiritualities, more Christianity, Buddhism, shamanism, Druidism, just trying to figure out, what in the hell happened to me and why is this stuff happening? And it led to doing this show. But one of my big experiences has been seeing beings of light with my physical eyes. And I've seen two leave my home down here in Silver Lake, Florida. I've seen them many times, and shamans say they're luminous beings of light. That's what they call them. I've talked to medicine men that say down in Peru they see them in the sky and have like Shining One festivals. So I'm like, okay, that's interesting. So
Yep.
stuff like that happens. But I think a lot of it was from suffering and maybe the Great Spirit showing me that that's what we are on some level. And I don't know 110%, but there's different theories. And that's, I guess, it's kind of like seeing a glimpse into like maybe a near death experience with that.
Mhm.
And I'm just kind of curious, how did you get into near death experiences? Was it an actual experience?
Yeah, we've got a little time I can tell my story. How about that?
We
That
got
sounds
time.
good.
So, back in 1981, I was in love with this woman. Her name was Mary Fran, and she and her son Nolan, who had just turned 7, were returning from a lake. Mary Fran was taking a class on sailing, and Nolan was hanging out on the beach with his babysitter. And as they left the lake and were turning left onto a county road, Mary Fran looked into the setting sun, didn't see the car coming, pulled out right in front of it, and it hit her right in the driver's side door, killing her instantly. And Nolan was in the back seat, and he wound up with this severe head trauma. And both of them were taken to Rochester Mayo, and it took Nolan 6 days to make his transition. That winds up becoming important because during that intervening 6 days between the accident and when Nolan made his transition, there was a lot of time for the relatives to come and hold vigil for Nolan. And Mary Fran was one of 9 children, and so her brothers and sisters and spouses and boyfriends and girlfriends and aunts and uncles, grandparents showed up, really good friends, and that's just on her side of the family. And then there's my family. So there was a lot of us who were in the waiting room and holding vigil with Nolan. We had devised this scheme where we would, in 2-hour shifts, we would go in and read to Nolan or talk to him and keep him company. Nolan was in a coma, but we know from all of the death and dying materials that hearing is the last physical sense to go. And so there was probably a really good chance that even though he couldn't respond to us in any kind of verbal way, he could hear us. So we wound up talking to him. And so on the morning of the 6th day, Mary Fran's oldest sister, Jannie, and I had the shift from 3 in the morning until 5 in the morning. And we went in and we read stories to him, and we talked about all of his relatives. And if you get 40, 50 relatives in a small waiting room, there's funny stories that come out of that. And the group had gone on a raiding party and stolen the cushions off of other couches in the hospital just so they could put them on the floor. There was all kinds of things we were trying to do to keep it light and know that that we cared about him. So it gets to be about 4:45 in the morning, just before our shift was to end. And Jannie was an emergency room nurse, trauma care, and so she knew this drill. And she's standing at the end of the bed and looking at the charts. Yeah, excuse me. And she, then looks at the monitors that are surrounding the bed. And what happened was, she just shook her head and looked at me and said, "Scott, it's time. We need to say goodbye." So she reached out her hand, we grabbed some chairs, and we sat down next to Nolan's head. And what happened then was that Jannie was talking to him and said, we love you and we care for you. You've been a very brave boy. You've been fighting to stay with us, and we so appreciate your struggle. But if your mother comes, now remember she died 6 days before.
Yes.
So she said, "Nolan, if your mother comes to pick you up, you can go with her. That's okay, and you can be with your mother." And then, then it was my turn, and I had a chance to say roughly the same thing, that we loved him dearly, and he had been a very brave boy, and really, you could see him just fighting so hard to stay alive. But Mary Fran came, that it was okay for him to go and be with her. And that ended the shift, and we left, and another crew came in. Well, about 45 minutes later, the nurse came into the waiting room where we were all trying to sleep and scattered higgledy-piggledy everywhere. And she said, "It's time. It's time. You need to come and be with him as he slips away." So we did, and we all piled into this little hospital room. And as it turned out, I was one of the last people who entered the room, and it was already 4 deep around the bed. So I didn't see any point in standing in the back. So I wound up just sitting on a windowsill with Mary Fran's youngest brother, Willie, and we just waited. And you could see, the heart monitor going, and then at some point, the heart monitor goes flat, and it has that ominous tone.
Yeah.
That tone, just by itself, will break your heart. But when that heart monitor went flat, what I experienced was Mary Fran coming across the veil and coming up to her son and scooping him up out of his physical body. And they had this exquisite reunion, as you could only imagine, between mother and child. And for some reason, I got to participate in that. That was really, it was extraordinary. The tenderness and reunion between the two of them. And then, really, to my surprise, what happened next was that the two of them turned to me, came across and embraced me, and then the three of us went into the light. And I've never been in such a profound place in my life. It was exquisite. It was loving. It was this this embrace, not only from Mary Fran and Nolan, but the embrace of the universe that said that you're one with us. And the three of us got to spend some time together, and we had to communicate with each other, not with English words. It was telepathic, I think, the best way to put it. And we communicated to each other our love for each other, and we got a chance to say goodbye. And at one point, we were done, and not in a bad way. It's just like, it's finished. It's at the end. And then Mary Fran turned and drew Nolan, and the two of them went off further into the light. And I'm there, and then I come back to my physical body. And now we know this as a shared death experience. But that wasn't, that language just entered our vocabulary a couple years ago.
Yes.
Known as an empathetic near-death experience, or shared near-death experience, all of those titles. But that's not the end of it. What was really unusual was that I'm with Mary Fran and Nolan in the light, and we're together and communicating with each other. But at the very same time, I am absolutely present in the room with all of the grieving relatives. And I know this because I'm at this spot, and it's like the love of the universe is just trying to break out of me. And my face is filled with joy. and it was entirely inappropriate for the room. I mean, they moments before had lost, their nephew or their grandson or their cousin, and people are hugging each other and weeping on each other's shoulders, and I'm in this state that I can't even begin to describe how blissful and unconditional love it was. So anyway, the only thing I could think of to do is to take and cover my face with my hand, because if somebody had looked at me and saw what my facial expression was, it would have been misinterpreted. So, I stayed in that place for a while, and until I could regain my composure, and then I could rejoin with the people back in the hospital room again. So
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely sorry for your loss. I've had a lot too, so I understand being in those situations when you deal with that. But that's what I was trying to figure out. So you were there, conscious in the room, but was it like a meditative state? And I know when I've seen my light beings and weird stuff and seen in the heavens, it kind of feels like, I call it the hand of God. It's like something touches you, this comforting thing, and you see it. And then later you can go to the same place you saw it, and it's dull, like that ain't there, like it's not there anymore. It's like something shows you. And I for some reason I keep thinking of Stephen King's The Dead Zone, the guy that sees all the prophecy stuff. but so you're in the room. I mean, having that's a lot. That's a lot,
yeah.
for sure.
Well, it was. Now we call that bilocation. Because I had two separate consciousnesses that were independent and fully functioning. I was in the room and I was fully present. I wasn't in a meditative state in the room with the relatives, and I was with Mary Fran and Nolan in the light, and communicating with them. So I had this split, and I grew up in southern Minnesota, small town. Just it was Mankato, Minnesota. Those of you who watched Little House on the Prairie, that's the area that I grew up in. And my faith tradition was a Presbyterian church. And let me tell you, I mean, they don't talk about bilocation. They don't talk about the fact that that you can witness somebody crossing the veil. It's just not in the lexicon of the Presbyterian church that in the moment of your greatest grief, you are in your greatest joy. And it's even to this day, when I tell this story, I get choked up about it. And, part of it is I'm sad, but it's been a long time, it was 40 years ago. And at the same time, it's incredible joy that it's available to me, that I can close my eyes and I can be in that space again, and that's an extraordinary gift.
So what do you think happens when we die? From what I've seen, it seems like we're these like weird glowy light aliens or something. That's what it seems like. And these are the cocoons, like the movie Cocoon by Ron Howard. I've brought that up 4 million times. But what do you think happens? Are we glowy light beings? That's what it seems like.
Well, it's really interesting you should ask that, because have you had Bruce Grayson on by any chance on your show?
No, I haven't.
So he's like the number one guy. He did all of the research from the very beginning into near-death experience. He's a medical doctor. He's a psychiatrist, and I had a chance to have a conversation with him this week, and I asked him that question. So I said, you've interviewed a zillion people who've had near-death experiences. What form do we take? And he had a really interesting answer, and it's one that I agree with. And it goes like this. He said, I think in the near-death experience that anybody who has one, that we all have essentially the same experience, but in our brain has to make sense of the experience, and the only thing that it has to draw on are the metaphors that are stored in our memory. And so when you read the experiences of near-death experiencers, when you read their stories, he said it reads like they're culturally derived. So if you're Native American, you would see, your totem animals. If you're Christian, you might see Jesus. If you're Muslim, maybe you see Muhammad. It's just the idea is that that they're pulling off of what it is we know to try to make sense of that experience. He told me a great story. He said he was interviewing a trucker who had a near-death experience, and when the trucker left his physical body and started to go towards the light, he said it was the weirdest thing. I just went, I went right up this tailpipe towards the light, and I went, well, how perfect is that? Other people would call it a tunnel. Other traditions would call it a well or a cave. It's so the answer is it can take all different kinds of forms. There are tons of stories about light beings and the role that they play with us, and that essentially we are a light being, and then it even goes a little bit further by saying you can actually even lose that energetic look and become a point of consciousness that exists without form. So, yeah, it kind of depends on where you are on this spectrum.
Yeah. I get it, though. I get it.
Well, I have been I've been studying near-death experiences for 25 years now, and one of the things people need to have this sense of transition. I'm in this physical realm, in this physical universe, and I'm now moving into a non-physical universe, and that sense of transition can take all different kinds of forms. Now we most commonly associate it with a tunnel. It doesn't have to be a tunnel. The new research that just came out a couple of weeks ago, William Peters did it in his new book, At Heaven's Door, talking about shared death experience, the kind I had.
Mm-hmm.
He was saying that there's a lot of ascension. So instead of going down a tunnel, the idea is like you're ascending upwards. So maybe that's a staircase or an escalator or floating, or some way of our spirit body moving upward into the light.
It's definitely, I found his book and saved it to look at later on Amazon. But it's interesting when I think about my experiences of appearing into the heavens and seeing all these beings of light, almost like a Sims game is what it reminds me of. I don't even really like that game, but that's what it kind of reminded me of. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen the Sims game where it's just all these avatars everywhere, and that's kind of what it looked like they were talking. And it kind of seems like, I guess there's the quantum realm around the earth where we go when we die, and you get maybe a life review, and then they usher you off somewhere else. But what's fascinating, at the time, it was like I could see into it, and I was like, I'd already beat cancer before, but there's been times I've seen such weird stuff. You go, am I dying? Is that why I'm seeing this stuff? And it's just like, it's a gift that I'm still trying to figure out, and I'm sure you are, but it definitely, and I know you had that experience, but did any more come, and what happens? I know you're into the meditation, so I know you've had a lot of interesting things happen there, right?
Yep. Well, one of the things that happens as a result of having had a shared death experience, or anybody who's had a near-death experience, um, is that you touch the light. And when you touch the light, it changes everything, absolutely changes everything. And there's this wonderful metaphor that Anita Morjani uses when she was describing it. She says, it's kind of like you're in this big warehouse and you've got a flashlight and you're working your way down to the other end of the warehouse and you've got this flashlight that's illuminating the path ahead of you, and you can't see the end, but you know you're going that way. And then all of a sudden somebody turns on the light in the warehouse. Boom! And you can see how enormous the warehouse is, and it's filled with all kinds of things you could never have imagined. And then, boom, the light goes off again, and you're stuck with your little flashlight, but you never forget where you're going because you could see the end of it, and all of the other stuff that's in the warehouse. And you're going, well, what was over there? What was in that box? That kind of looked like the Ark of the Covenant. I mean, just you get this. It's not that conscious, but there's this sense of curiosity that all of a sudden gets lit by the fact that you touched the light. And so that's what happened to me. I wound up. It wasn't this conscious. This is like a pattern I figured out after the fact, but I wound up going to all the ancient sites to see if there was still some residual energy there that would allow me to go back to that spot where I was with Mary Fran and Nolan. I absolutely knew that if I did it once, I could do it again. And so I went to Stonehenge, and I went to Machu Picchu, and I visited the Sphinx and the Great Pyramids and all the temples along the Nile. I studied with shamans in both North and South America. I went to Japan and studied with the Emoto religion. I mean, I did all kinds of things to try to touch that space again. And it wasn't until I went to the Monroe Institute and discovered their method of meditation, it allowed me to enter into that same space again and be able to hold that space long enough that I could, begin to navigate around the non-physical universe. So that was a long answer to your question. Yeah. Have I had all kinds of experiences since then? You bet. And that's now what I teach people how to do, is to go to the same places that near-death experiencers go to, but thank God, without the physical trauma. You can do it through meditation. Thank you for asking.
I've heard of the Monroe Institute. I mean, I know we meditate in a various assortment of ways, but I'm still kind of trying to, to learn exactly what it is. It seems like just going into your headspace and closing your eyes and, seeing what happens, so to speak. But I'm still trying to figure it out, I guess. I know I do it on certain levels, but I'm still learning about it. There's a lot to learn, I think. But is that really what it is on a lot of levels, breathing and just closing your eyes and kind of focusing on the like you'll see energy in your head or whatever you see,
Well, I think it's about matching our personal vibrations to the vibratory level of where we want to go. So, for instance, if you want to go to the tunnel and you want to explore the tunnel, well, that's at a certain vibratory level. If you want to go see your dead relatives, and well, that's at another vibratory level. That area of life between lives, that's another vibratory level. Not many people have teased this out yet, but in near-death experience, people touch the light, but there's 3 different kinds of light. There's the common one we all see, like the one Harry Potter had, was a white light at the end of the tunnel. That's a really common metaphor. But there's also clear light and black light. Mm-hmm. And so each one of those is a slightly different vibratory level, and there's a different kinds of experiences associated with each one of those. And so at its core, it's about matching your vibratory level with the vibratory level that you want to go to. Some people do that naturally, like you, Jeffrey. You've had an experience, and what you can do is, close your eyes, kind of recreate that experience, remember what it was like, and you can go there again. We are very good as human beings in remembering what it is, how we. I'm not saying that right. We human beings learn very easily about different vibratory levels. We just have to learn them.
Yes.
And it's one of the things I think that Bob Monroe did. I think he was brilliant at it. Was inventing this how to use binaural beat technology to enter into meditative states, so that we can be there long enough to use tools and techniques to navigate the non-physical universe. So, did I answer your question after all that?
Yes, you did. You're doing a great job. I'm really enjoying it. And I love when I find out more about my weird light being experiences, and this definitely helped me to learn more about all, what I saw and everything. I'm curious.
So I got one for you.
Okay.
So a lot of near-death experiencers, when we go to the vibratory level where the light beings hang out, and there are certain light beings that are assigned to us. They're like our teacher protector. That's a shorthand that I hear all the time. They don't call them light beings. They call them angels. There's all different kinds of names, but they're assigned to us, and their job is to introduce us to the non-physical world from an energetic perspective. And very often what they'll do is they will merge with you, or you will step into their energy field, or they will step into yours. I guess it goes both ways, but the idea is that when you step into that space, there is this sense that their light infuses every part of your soul, or your spirit body, or your light body, and that any of the dark and hidden places that exist there because of our lifetime here on Earth, there's just no room for it anymore, because the light from the light being drives out all of the dark places. And it is this sense of being totally loved, that everything about you is valuable and worth loving, and there's no secrets anymore. The dark spots, the light spots, everything is worthy of love, and that we are treasured as souls. And that is the experience that people walk away with. When they merge with a light being, it's unconditional love.
I think I do it sometimes. I'm not going to rule it out. I'm telling you, I think so. There are situations, and I know you said you went to some sacred sites and things. I've had some extraordinary experiences with the sun, and I think these beings of light somehow are connected to the sun, as is our energy bodies. But I've had experiences where I've closed my eyes and then let the white light of the sun fill your body. And I've had some really weird things happen, like scrying in a lake. I was in a gym once and I saw like a pink spear over every person in the gym. Just some weird ones. One of my weirdest ones, I've never seen a gray alien, but I've met people that have. But at this particular time, I think I saw a gray alien. I let the light fill my body, went into a house where there was a woman we were helping with hospice. She's passed away now, but she was 91. And I went and let that light come through my body. And then I walked through the house and I saw what looked like an astral body of like a gray alien in her room and peeked out. And it was really quick. And you're like, is that just the sun messing with my head? You know, a sunspot like a flash does with a camera.
Yeah,
But it
yeah.
really seemed like I saw a gray alien. But my point is, it seems like these light bodies and our souls are connected to this sun source, which it could be, you know, is God or the tunnel of light or whatever. But somehow it's given me sight and help with that. And I'm just kind of curious if you had any run-ins like that with the white light and stuff like that from the sun.
It's interesting you should mention that, because you know there's times in the summer when you're sitting outside in your swimsuit or something, and you're just, you know, drifting off into that light hypnagogic state, and there's something about the energy of the sun that it just like goes through you, and you dissolve into that energy. So yes, I have that sense of where your physical boundaries dissolve. You know, where you can't really tell where you end and the light begins. It's,
Yes.
yeah, you know, so it's, yeah, so like we dissolve into this energetic being. Yeah.
It's like the
Yeah.
sun's a big frog and we're tadpoles. There's
Love
something
that.
to it. That's weird. Weird for sure.
Well, to take that a little bit further, one of the functions of light beings is that they accompany you during the life review. And during this life review, their job is, as it was explained to me, is to love you through the experience. And essentially, you know, their job is to encourage you, but they keep asking the same question over and over again, which is, what did you learn? What did you learn? And as you know, are re-experiencing your life in the physical again, you know, that's the refrain. What did you learn? What did you learn? And you know, very quickly you learn that the only judge in a life review is yourself, because they, the universe, the light beings, they totally love and accept who you are and the travails that you've had, trying to navigate this very funky physical world that we live in. And so that's kind of cool that they keep us on track, and they teach us. I got a couple more stories about life review. Do you want me to go on that?
Sure, definitely.
All right. So that's a very it's one of the common elements of a near-death experience is that people have life reviews. But what's not so known is that life reviews happen in three different levels. One is that you get to live your life over again, and you get to have all of your thoughts and all of your sensations. You know exactly how it works, and you can slow time, you can speed it up. I mean, you're in total control of this life review that you have. So you get to relive it with all of its sensations as you did in the physical world. I had a guy tell me that at one point he slowed it way down. It was during the summer. He was in Minnesota, and he said he was out on the lawn and he could count all the mosquitoes flying around him. You know, he could slow it down that much. I thought that was kind of.
It's like afterlife VR.
Yeah, exactly. But so that's one thing. The second thing is that you can, at the same time, you are reliving your life. You're reliving it as the other person who's in the exchange. So, you know, when when the three of us get to relive our life in the life review, I am me, but I'm also Jeff, and I'm also Len. I get to be and hear and see and understand all of your thoughts, and so you get to see the consequences of this relationship, whatever that is, what's going on. And so you get to, that checkout person at the grocery store who irritated you. Well, what was that all about? Well, you're reliving it as the checkout girl. She's 16. It's her first day at work. They didn't show her how to use the registers. She's frustrated. She wants to do a good job, but they didn't train her. She doesn't even have a badge. They didn't have one. You get to understand all of that. And then the third thing is that you get to relive your life again, but you live it from the omniscient point of view. So you're up above the scene and you're going, oh, look what happened. I told Wham this story, and then she went and turned to her friend and told that story again, and that affected, the gas station attendant because the story got told again. And all of a sudden, you get to see how whatever interaction it is that we have, how that ripples out in our lives, in our families' lives, into the community at large. And then all of this happens outside of time. So this is all happening at the same time. You relive your life, the other person, omniscient, all at once. So this is where English begins to fail because when I say you get to relive your life, you're thinking of it sequentially, but it doesn't really work that way. It's like all of it, you get to relive it all. That's where that expression came from.
Yes.
My life flashed before my eyes. Well, it's literally true. It's just like that fast, and you get to relive the whole thing. All right. So for your viewers, this next thing I'm going to tell you is worth the price of admission. Okay?
Okay.
So you're in your life review, and you're having this exchange with the young girl at the grocery store, right? And you're frustrated because she's not ringing your things up quickly enough, and you got someplace to go, and that's the exchange. Well, you can turn to the being of light and say, I'd like to do that differently. Can we relive that and do it differently? And they'll rewind the thing. You'll come down, lay your groceries on the belt. She's having trouble, and you'll say to her, is this your first day at work? She says, yes. I've had difficult first days at work too. Tell you what, just do what you need to do. I'll be patient. You will get through this together. Not to worry. You're being very brave, and and give her a little reinforcement. And then you get to see how that played out in your life, her life, community's life, and both of them get to enter into our human experience. And it's like it sets up another timeline, and both of them are true.
Mm-hmm.
So we get to have really full control over how we want to experience things because we can speed up, slow down. But we also get to say, I want a do-over on that one. I didn't do that as well as I wanted to, or I found out something in the when I was reliving it as a young girl, and I realized that it was her first day of work. I can help with that. So those situations where you want to change the ending, you can, and it becomes part of your experience as well as the experience you had the first time through in the physical world. So it's one of the treasured gifts that come with a near-death experience, particularly a life review, that make it incredibly valuable for not only us, but we get to energetically change our past and do some healing that way. And Lord knows I got plenty to work on. How about you?
Yeah, it seems like I'm seeing into that realm where all that happens, like the life review realm or something. It's been a while since it's happened, but that's what it seems like. Do you think they make us come back here, and who's really in charge? Is this an interstellar prison, and we're space tyrant convicts from Flash Gordon? But no, 12 monkeys. But no, I just wonder, do they force you to come back? I hope not. Or let's say you don't
Yeah,
want to, and you want to go to a higher realm or a different species of alien and be that. Maybe there's different choices.
there's all kinds of choices, and you get to choose. And not only that, there's a committee that helps you set it up. So we call that the Council of Friends. And you sit down with the Council of Friends and you say, okay, I want this kind of a person for my mother, this for my father. I want these kinds of experiences in my childhood. Who's going to help me with that? How am I going to, transverse into adulthood? And, so you get to map out your life, and you arrange with other people what roles they're going to play, and poof. And then you get to go into the physical world where energetically it's laid out for you. You still have free choice.
Yep.
And it's one of those, when I finally got to that space, I began to really appreciate what Mary, Fran, and Nolan did for me. Because if we sat down ahead of time and said, Mary Fran said, I need to have this experience for myself, but it can help transport you into a different realm. And Nolan, says, what I'm going to do is, when I make my transition, I'm going to invite you, to come and join us during that first part of the trip to the light. And it's a very humbling thing to realize that those are gifts that we have arranged with each other. It's so I have this desire when I go to into the afterlife. There's some people I want to meet, and one of the people I dearly want to meet is Judas Iscariot. I was raised in Presbyterian church, Christian tradition, but I have an entirely different view of him now, because I can see where when Jesus was laying out his life, he said, I can't do what I need to do without somebody who will sacrifice themselves for me and turn him in, essentially, and play that role and be vilified for 2,000 years. And I thought, who would do this thing for Jesus? It has to be his best friend. Has to be. And so how do we come to that space of recognition that in our lives sometimes some of the really tough stuff that happens, like Mary Fran being killed in a car accident, might have been a gift to me. And maybe it was a gift to her family too, that this is something that they needed to learn through her death. So I do know that it was an extraordinary gift for, I think, 17 other people, because both she and Nolan were donors, organ donors. In fact, Mary Fran was the donor, the first heart transplant donor that Mayo did. And so she started a legacy with the Mayo systems. Her heart was the very first one to be transplanted into a young woman, a mother with 2 kids who, had that fibrosis thing.
Yes.
And she got another 6 months worth of life. And what a gift. What a gift for her children, for her husband. And, there was corneas, livers, and kidneys, and all of that. Really, she paid it forward. So
So I'm looking at your albums. They're by Hemisync. I've heard of them, and it's like meditation CDs.
yes,
That's pretty fascinating. I see near-death experience meditations, free-flow meditations, meeting your guides, exploring the tunnel, exploring source, radiating love. And where can you get those? Can you get those at your site, neardeathmeditations.com?
yep. NearDeathMeditations.com. What I tried to do with those series of albums is to put people into the vibratory state that's associated with the most common elements of a near-death experience. So, the first thing you do is encounter your guide. So there's an album just for that. And then there's Exploring the Tunnel, which is an extraordinary place. And then there's the encounters with the three different kinds of light. With the black light, which is the source, Genesis 2, and God created the void. And, that's where we're going. We're going to the place where everything exists before form. And then there's the clear light, the light of love. I'll talk about that in a minute. But, that's called radiating love. And then the white light, we have a bunch of exercises in there, but it's like reuniting with your loved one and exploring the cities of light and encountering the realm of all knowledge. So it's a series that are different vibratory levels that are extraordinarily helpful for exploring the non-physical universe.
I'll definitely check them out. I've heard of Hemisync, and I'll look into it for sure. And that's neardeathmeditations.com.
Yep.
Well, I guess one thing I wonder about, and I know you've talked to a lot of people about the subject, does anything dark ever come up? Like, as far as things that are creepy, or is that, have you reached a state to where those things can't touch you now, or maybe some people don't believe those things exist at all, and of course that's up to an individual, what they think, their opinion. But I'm just kind of curious, does anything like that ever come up?
Yes. And it's really interesting you bring up that question, because this is just now, in the last 2 weeks, with the release of At Heaven's Door, it has really brought this into light. The reason is that study was done by William Peters at the Shared Crossings Project, and it was 800 people who had shared death experiences. It's a big study, and of the 800 people, 0 had a negative experience. Every single one of them entered into what was a benevolent afterlife. Every single one had the experience of going into a benevolent afterlife. And these are people who they're dying. And like Nolan, he's dying and he's going to the afterlife. And I happen to be somebody that he cared about, and he pulled me through, and I went with him. So all of the people in the study for the shared death experience were going with people who were actually dying. That's a pretty big point. And every single one of them went through the benevolent afterlife. Back to near-death experiences, that's a different thing. This is where, my physical body has had such trauma that it dies. And then I leave my body and I go and have this experience in the non-physical realm, and then I come back. Something, depends on what study you read, but call it 15 to 20% have what's known in the literature as less than positive experience. And there seems to be a bunch of reasons for this. Um, one of which is a 2x4 alongside the head thing. It's like, hey, Fred, whack. I'm showing you this scary creature because I'm going to really impress upon you that you are screwing your life up in the physical. You were supposed to be doing this, this, and this, and you aren't anywhere close to that. You're lazy. You're taking drugs, or whatever. It's not working, and you've got to shape up and get about your business. So there's the 2x4 kind of thing. That actually happens quite a bit with people who have a negative near-death experience. The other thing is, I call it the test for dominion, which is when I teach meditation courses, every once in a while you'll get this drooling monster kind of thing, maybe, or it startles you, and I think of Harry Potter and the three-headed dog. It's drooling, right? and you're going, what? Well, what we try to teach people when they're in that situation is to take a breath. Not that you need one, but step back and go, hey, scary drooling dog, what are you doing here? Why are you trying to get my attention? Because you certainly have it. So tell me, what is this all about? And almost universally, a scary dog will morph into some sort of guide figure who says, okay, we have been trying to tell you for years that you need to go to school on the East Coast or something. I made that up. It's just there's some sort of message they're trying to get through, and this is how they're choosing to do it. Joseph Campbell, Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey.
Yes.
Some people view negative near-death experiences in terms of that, and saying, what's happening here is that you're at the phase in your life where you are being tested, and that you have to overcome this test in order for you to continue on your journey. And so it's a test. It's designed to help people toughen up, or whatever it is that they need to do to go through the test. Okay, so those like three of the most common reasons for people to have a negative near-death experience. And the fourth one is, I don't know. I have some people who have described their near-death experiences, and I go, it's not a 2x4. These are lovely people. It's not, test of dominion, or it's not the hero's journey. I don't know why this happened to them that way. And I just have to shrug my shoulders and go, well, in due time, we'll figure it out. But it's a tough one for sure. That fourth one, when there doesn't seem to be any logic or reason behind it, that takes a little further investigation. And let's face it, if you had a big scary experience and go back into that space to ask the question, why am I having this experience? Why did I? That takes that's a challenge. It takes some real bravery to do that.
Yes, I definitely think there are things that don't have our best interest here that, but you need to use discernment. I know that, I don't know if you've ever seen Robin Williams and What Dreams May Come, the movie.
I love that movie, and it's a wonderful, when he goes into heaven for the first time and he's walking along that valley and everything is a different color of paint.
Yes.
It's a really good explanation of a clear light experience. where everything is exuding its own light. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh,
What were you
it's
going to say
okay.
about Robin Williams?
It's fine. It's based on a book by Richard Matheson, but also in those Conversations with God books, and they talk about it's the closest representation of heaven in a movie on many levels, and that may or may not be true, but it's in the book, and supposedly God says it. So, but those books are interesting, but it's definitely neat. And with some of the stuff with the hell and stuff, with getting in those frames of mind, let's say, for instance, you're someone terrible and a serial killer and you killed 10 people. Maybe you do go somewhere dark when you die. I don't know, but someone may also just have done did something by accident and then got into the state that they think they're going to hell when they die, and maybe they create that for a minute and get pulled out of it. So I'm sure there's different things like that.
Yep. Excuse me. There's a whole body of work around soul retrieval, and for the people who get stuck, and one of the universal truths, which kind of shows up in that movie, is if a person winds up in the space, they're confused, or they think they need to be judged for whatever reason. As soon as they ask for help, then it shows. So it's one of the rules that we know about the non-physical universe is that it's reactive, meaning that what you put out is what you get back, and it applies here in the physical world too, although it works a little slower. And anybody who's in kind of that limbo area, that's the clue, and that's how we help people become unstuck. Is to get them to see a different future, ask for help from relatives or some divine being or whatever. It's changing the energy pattern from being stuck to looking forward to something wonderful.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask Wham. I know you know a little bit about soul retrieval, and also isn't that like retrieving? I know it's a complex thing, but like soul fragments from being wounded. And the other thing I want to say, Wham, if by any chance you want to sit in for Evelyn next week, Jay will be there. If you don't want to, it's okay. But Evelyn will be here next Friday if you want to sit in. If you don't, it's okay. But if you do, let me know.
Okay.
But yeah, soul retrieval. What's your take on that, Wham? I mean, condensed version. That's the fragments of the soul from wounds, or
Well, I guess I've been involved with certain aspects of that. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I've done has been sort of spontaneous with people. I know that on this show I've described different experiences that I've had where people have seemingly had various kinds of attachments from maybe dead relatives,
Sure.
fragments, or just stuff like that. And where I usually get involved with it is, in fact, I had an experience not long ago where I've recently been associating with this woman and sort of trying to help her. She lives in a haunted house, and she, until very recently, has seemed to be a kind of the target of whatever it is that's there. There is something there, but it's like attached to the house itself. And because she's a sensitive person, I mean, oftentimes I have found that things like that, whatever they are, I don't really personally try to plumb their origins that much. I consider it to be sort of not my business. But a lot of times things like that seem to be attracted because they require energy in order to manifest in our universe in any way. They seem to like to attach themselves to people who are either sensitive in some way or maybe have certain vulnerabilities. Maybe they are sort of psychically porous or something. They don't know how to block it, essentially, or they don't have a strong enough personality in some ways. I've never had trouble making things go away because I just say, go away, and it goes away, whatever it is. But what's interesting is that all I've been doing really with her, I was able to help her figure out that it wasn't actually her, that it was actually her roommate. Her roommate is like really jealous of her and attached to her. And her roommate was actually, it was like whatever it was working through her roommate to try to keep her in certain places. Kind of energetically, keep her vulnerable, keep her dependent on her roommate, because her roommate is really threatened if she attempts to do anything independently on her own or anything like that. Just this kind of weird codependent relationship that's developed. So all I did, I didn't really do anything in particular. I just started talking to her and supporting her and giving her positive energy and positive feedback. And for a brief period of time, that energy became more powerful in the household and started bugging her more. And so I just kept doing that. And then one night, and this happened like 3 weeks ago, one night I was awakened in the middle of the night by something that was right here. And it was trying to talk to me. I was completely awake. And it was trying to talk to me in this weird gravelly voice. And it was telling me to leave her alone. And I knew immediately that it was whatever it was, And I literally did this in bed. I just said, "Oh, go away." And I just went like this and shoved it, and it was gone. And ever since then, there have been virtually no intrusions in that house.
Nice. So was this was it malevolent? Was it just?
It's not malevolent in the. It's more mildly parasitic.
Okay.
It's not malevolent in the sense that it actively harms things. It will occasionally, like the only activity that's happened in the past 2 or 3 weeks is that it's disturbed the animals, which is interesting because it seems to, for some reason, it seems now to be blocked from disturbing her for whatever reason. But I connect that to soul retrieval because it's been a similar process with me when I've become involved with people who have asked for assistance. And I just kind of, I don't have any particular technique. My whole thing is just, I just sort of talk to people and encourage them and do love light things and help people to try to figure out like what in themselves may be drawing this or holding on to this. And I don't really do anything specific. I mean, I've been taught certain techniques by certain teachers, but every situation is so different that I really can't.
The common thing that you're telling me is that you have added additional energy to the situation, which changes the vibratory rate of the whatever entity that's hanging around.
Right.
Like when you pushed it away, clearly you were annoyed.
Oh,
and
you wake me up at your peril. I mean, this thing with discarnate entity, well, even with humans, but anything, you wake me up and you know.
Yeah, so you clearly shot a bunch of energy at this thing and completely changed its orientation. So it's off doing a different thing. And it's all okay, well, at least the work that we do, it's the same kind of thing. We're changing their energy level by. Well, I like what you said. We talk to them, and like there are people waiting to see you. Don't you want to go visit your friend? There's
Yeah,
there's a
I
really
mean,
nice place to be. All of that changes our.
right. And I guess, I mean, part of what I've told this woman is that, and this is what I do just around my own house, is that like the house I live in is an old house. It's like over 100 years old. Lots of people have lived in and died in it. It's got a lot of memories. This is an old house, you know. I mean, to me, houses are like living entities, and they contain all the stuff that's been in them, you know, all the probable realities and everything that's happened in them. They're just all here. And so I don't necessarily want to make any of it go away. It's kind of interesting, you know what I mean? But there are things that the house occasionally expresses itself. It'll make weird noises, and weird things will pop in and out, and you know, whatever. But I don't necessarily feel the need to block any of that or do anything. For me, what I do is I just try to maintain my energy at a certain level, or help other people, you know, build their energy to a certain level. So if anything's going to interact with me, it's got to raise itself to that level. It's got to be at that level. And if it's not, you know, honestly, I may know you're there, but I'm going to ignore you because you're a butthead. You know, you're going to have to choose growth if you're going to talk to me. You know, I'm not going to deal with it. I do the same thing with humans. You know, if a human isn't going to be civilized talking to me, then I'm not going to consign them to hell in my brain. I'm going to wish them well, but I'm not going to have a lot to do with them because I can't really talk to them anyway.
Yeah.
We're existing at that vibration where communication is difficult. So, you know, I mean, I guess that's what I do. I don't know if that makes any sense, Jeffrey. It's not,
Yes.
It's not specifically soul retrieval, but some of the I've had experiences, like I've had my own experiences where I had a really bad head injury at one point years ago. It was one of the times I almost was killed, and in a freak car accident, and I was on my back for like literally 2 weeks recovering from it, and as a result of the process of recovery from it, I started having a series of experiences which I later came to recognize were, I guess, what some people call past life experiences, which I'd never really had before. And but out of that, I had been studying like the Seth material for years previous to that. You know, and you probably know, Scott, that Jane Roberts and Robert Monroe knew each other and kind of, you know.
Well, you get an extra star for studying the Seth material.
Touch brain. I've read everything. I've been studying it for decades now. But anyway, I've been studying it for a while. And so I already sort of had that framework, but I started having these experiences, and what came out of that injury was a series of memories, or the ability to kind of touch all of these different lives. I mean, I through the Seth material, I understood they weren't my past lives; they were lives that I'm connected to as part of my entity. You know, that I'm experiencing as my past, but I figured out how to do what you talked about, where if I connected with these beings or these other people in these other lives, and we could experience each other emotionally, and so if they were having a problem in that life, I could tune into that life, and I could figure out what that problem was, and sort of we helped each other. You know what I mean? Helped each other heal these different realities.
Keep talking. I have to plug my computer in. It's not.
Oh, I see. That's fine.
Okay, I'll be right back. No, keep going, Lamb.
Okay, but
Yeah.
but for example, probably one of the most intense experiences I had was with regard to that, and I guess this is kind of a soul retrieval kind of thing, is that I had a very clear memory of a soul that I'm connected to, that is supposedly, that from our perspective is a past life, and this individual was in that life a Shaivite renunciate in India, and my experience of him was very specific, because Shaivite renunciates he wasn't a very good renunciate. He was very angry. He didn't like being a renunciate. I'm serious. He was very angry. And I was able to tune into his anger because at the time in my life, I was really, really angry. So I had these series of experiences with him, meditations with him, where I realized why he was angry. And the main reason why he was angry was because he had not chosen to be a renunciate, really. He had been orphaned as a child. He had been brought up by a group of renunciates, because that's not uncommon for them to do that. And he felt like his life had been stolen from him and he hadn't really understood his choices. But the problem was that he was physically too far along in that process. Like he'd gone through the castration process and all of that stuff. Well, it's a virtual castration. It's not, they don't actually physically do stuff, but because of the yoga that they do, it sort of cuts that off in a way. So he couldn't actually go out and be a householder. He couldn't do that. And so, but what ended up happening was a kind of emotional, spiritual exchange I had with him, so that eventually he was able to figure out that the way he could regain some of that loss, or, in the sense of redeem some of that loss, was to connect himself back to a regular human community and act as a kind of
Guide,
a guide intermediary, right? And so he started. He attached himself to this village and this small shrine, and he started he started doing stuff for people, giving people blessings, stuff like that, and somehow that it helped him. It was very interesting. That was over a period of time, and as his anger eased, my anger eased. He was very definitely a different person than me, because, and the thing that has always convinced me that those experiences are real is because from those experiences, I gained a lot of information about, like, cultural information, historical information, stuff that I didn't know, that later on then I would confirm. In other words, I would have these experiences before I actually had the knowledge of these cultures or these, and then, like, sometimes two or 3 decades later, I would find out that this is in fact the way this works. So, there wouldn't have been any other way I could have gotten that knowledge unless I was really connecting with a consciousness that was connected there. And he, in our terms, he lived about 500 years ago. But so that's like one experience I've had. But I've had a number of experiences like that with, I don't, and even a couple of experiences with future selves, or completely another universe selves, in worlds that couldn't actually physically exist in the physics that we know, so,
he said something. I know, Scott, you said something weird about a point of nothingness or something strange earlier. What was that again? Something about you can be a dot or something. Like, is that some people seek to return to the void, not do this anymore? That's what,
there's an area that we call the park. It's that area of life between lives, and it's and that's the area where we make our choices about, do we want to come back into the physical world and learn a particular lesson, or help somebody else have a lesson. And sometimes we go, well, no, I'd rather be live in the Pleiades this time, and next I'm going to be a gas giant star. I don't know. You get your choice.
I just want to be a well-loved cat. I think that would be the perfect life. Is a well-loved cat.
Is the true horror that this is infinite?
That's
just this physical universe. Think of all of it.
Yeah, we're talking about all the universes, Jeffrey.
is Infinity Terra. I'm just kidding. But Viking aliens, that sounds cool, Palladians. Reptilians, there's so many different sorts. The Norse, the blonde haired, blue eyes. I've seen a lot of stuff about that. So that's something I wondered if you can integrate into other alien races. Like, I'm sure at some level, I guess you could. I would think so.
Yeah,
I would.
why not?
Why not? It's all good.
You sit there and go, yeah, I've done Earth enough times.
I want to be ET.
Yeah, I want to be ET. I'd like to go live in that underwater world and have a carbon-based being or whatever. Carbon-based beings. I'm thinking Star Trek here. The silicone-based beings. Yeah.
I had a weird experience a few nights ago where I was feeling a lot of anxiety and high blood pressure. And for some reason, I was like, I feel the devil. Not quite sure why I said that, but it gets creepier. My mother woke up from a dream and thought my brother was looking in a window, and my brother was not. He was asleep. And basically, her window was closed and she was sleeping, so no one was looking in it anyway. It was in a dream space, someone looking in the window, and she came out at like 5 a.m. expressing that someone was looking in the window after I had that weird, creepy, anxiety. It's just weird. I don't know what the hell happened, but I said prayers, Archangel Michael, and prayed Psalms and from YouTube and whatever, It's about all you can do, but it was a strange experience. But
that's an extraordinary there's all that literature around lucid dreaming, where you enter into these states that are, hyper real and all the things you can do in that to work out your issues. I find one of the things really fascinating about lucid dreaming is it's easy to do out of body work. You can roll out of your body in a lucid dream very easily, and it's one of the reasons that people teach that if the traditional Bob Monroe way of leaving your physical body doesn't work for you, there's a bunch of other ways.
When I was first working on out of body stuff, I tried his classical method and from Journeys Out of the Body. And I actually did it. I mean, and it worked and scared the crap out of me. Which is really common, and I know, and it was like it scared the crap out of me, and I've never been able since then to get that technique to work again, just because it scared me so much. But I know it works. I got a hint for you then.
That's really common. It happened to me too. The first time I had my traditional out of body experience or classic out of body experience. Yeah, I floated on my body. I flew through the ceiling, and I was just, oh crap! It was just I slammed back into my body and I was going, ah.
Yeah.
Well, what I come to understand a lot later was that there's a difference between being afraid at a soul level and being afraid at a physical level.
Yeah.
At a soul level, I'm all over this. This sounds like fun. We're going to go tool around the universe. We're going to explore things. This is just great. But the physical body, if we're leaving our physical body at the wrong time, you're supposed to be doing this at night, dude. You're supposed to be doing this during the day. That means we're dying.
Yeah, I was very aware that it was my physical body. It was
yeah. But it's really helpful for any of your listeners. If that happens to you, it's really helpful to have a conversation with your physical body, and to be all right, I scared you. I'm sorry. I'm going to warn you ahead of time next time. It's perfectly safe. Everybody's, and you kind of do this little talk to your physical body, and it helps. It helps. So thank you for bringing that up. I think that's really valuable for those of us who tried and tried and tried, and when it actually works, you're going, oh,
Well, one of the interesting kind of things that happened after that, though, is I snapped back in my body, and I like I said, I was really clear it was my body, because my body was going, "You're dying. I'm dying. I'm going to die if you do this." And but when I came back, I did have this wonderful. My body had this wonderful experience where I was really, and it's impossible to describe in any real way, because the words don't describe it. But I was acutely aware of every single cell in my body as kind of like a cell of light. It was really incredible. I remember just laying there and thinking, "Whoa, that's what my body is." Okay. I think of the
trillions of small bits of consciousness that make up this thing, and we think it's just one consciousness.
No, it was like this. It was.
This is a joint effort, dude.
It's really amazing. I mean, that part of it was very cool. So, I've had other out of body experiences since, although most of them are spontaneous now and done differently. But it was.
Well, one of the things that I started teaching at Monroe is bilocation. What happened to me when I was in my near-death experience. The fact that you can be fully present in your chair doing your meditation, and you can be someplace else. Mm-hmm. And that technique is really helpful for people who want to go down this path of learning how to navigate the non-physical universe, because you don't have to do the classic out of body, and you can do something that's a lot easier to learn.
Yeah, I've done stuff similar to that. The indigenous teachers I've worked with have taught me stuff that's similar to that. When I send out like bear medicine or something, that's the sort of thing we do. I guess is bilocation, because you're in more than one place.
You're in more than one place.
Sometimes multiple places, actually.
Yeah,
because you're not.
It's not uncommon to okay, I'm in my chair, and I'm also out on a beach in the Bahamas, and I'm up here observing me on the beach in the Bahamas and in my chair. So you got three going on, and the most I've ever heard about is there was a Swami in India who could hold 6 simultaneously. He's the man.
He's probably also got time to concentrate on that.
Yeah.
So, Scott, tell us about some of these shaman stories, dude. Come on. I know there's got to be some interesting. You said shamans. We've had a lot on the show. I have a book that's interviews, archives from radio shows of them. I just love that kind of stuff. Is there anything else you could tell us about any of that?
Oh, sure. I went down to Peru and studied with Don Eduardo Calderon. He's not alive anymore, but back in the 80s, he had gotten a message from his teachers, his non-physical guides, teachers, that it was time to open up the shaman tradition to Westerners. Up until that point, it had been a fairly guarded secret about how this worked within his lineage, and so he went on to explain how we would become part of his lineage, and we would go through a ceremony in order to do that. Okay, so we're sitting around a fire, and we each got our rattles, and we're singing the song Yichi Tai Tai and you I or, and it goes on and on, and you do it like 10,000 times a night. It just goes on a long time. Meanwhile, Don Eduardo Calderon, in order for us to be initiated into his tradition, started to name his teachers. And he would start with, my teacher was, I'm not good with Spanish names, so it was, Fred, and then before Fred there was Bob, and before Bob there was, Joseph, and then, he just, and it went on for hours, where he was marching back his lineage and back to the very first shaman. I mean, that was in his lineage anyway. It was one of those that just blew me away. Okay, second story. We are doing an exercise or a ceremony around a spiral, like a labyrinth, but it's a spiral in and then a spiral out. And and the idea is that what we're doing is we're going in as we're walking backwards. In his tradition, that would be we're slowing down time. And when we entered into the center of the spiral, we would be, time would have stopped, and we were, be able to perceive things that we normally couldn't within a time. Within time, when you're outside of time, you can perceive anything. Okay, so whatever. Let's give it a whirl. See what happens. So, I'm doing my chant, and I'm walking into the spiral. I get to the center of the spiral, and I lay down my little blessing that I have to leave in the center of the spiral, and I look up, and the sky is filled with ley lines. You can just see them arching and crossing each other. And I went, where'd that come from? This stuff works. Really? Just, and then as we come out of the spiral, then we're re-engaging into normal time and space, and they went away. I went, wow, that was a lot for my Western mind to take in. Probably the last one I had, we're at Machu Picchu, and a couple of the guys decided they were going to climb Huayna Picchu, which is the sister at Machu Picchu. There's kind of a volcanic core of the valley is next to it, and you can climb up it. Anyway, so they decided to climb up, and so they started to climb up, and they noticed this funny looking rock that was off to the side of the trail, and it didn't have any moss on it. It just shouldn't be there, and they had this really interesting. Anyway, so they picked it up. It was about the size of a grapefruit, and they bring it down, and so we're sitting there talking that night, and the group of they bring it out and say, guys, what do you think this is? Well, we had a geologist in the group, and like her mouth just dropped, and she goes, that's a meteorite, and it's full of nickel, some sort of metal, so it's all shiny. And so he said, let's hold a ceremony. Let's ask the meteorite why it's here. So we did the same sort of thing. We got in a circle and we started chanting, Itchy died, and then Don Eduardo, being kind of the advanced person that he is, did his magic, whatever that was, and starts to enter into a conversation with the spirit of this meteorite. And it turns out it was a guide and it was um, um, the guide resided within the meteorite, and it had recently arrived on Earth, and it was in particular designed to help humans with their transition. That we were entering into this new epoch, and that this guide needed, I'm not sure that's the right word, was acknowledged for his arrival, and for the role it was going to play with each one of us as helping the planet and our species evolve into our next stage. So
Yes.
I thought that was kind of cool.
Definitely fascinating for sure. So, has any UFO stuff ever come up on any of these adventures?
Um, I taught at the Monroe Institute for 35 years, and UFOs would, it depends on the group of folks. Some folks are really good at calling in UFOs, and so it could be a little hot spot right there. And so we had some folks that would, go out late at night and call them in, and they, no landings that I know of, but they come and hover.
Strange things in the sky. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, they're looking after the troops.
For sure. And the Monroe Institute, I've heard of it. Is there's books? Is that the best place to start if you want to learn more about it? Is there books?
Essentially, Bob Monroe back in the 1950s started having spontaneous out-of-body experiences. Mm-hmm. And for a decade, he wrote about them as he was trying to figure out what they were good for, and he was trying to map the non-physical universe based on his experiences.
Nice.
And a good friend of his, Russell Tart, the urban legend is that he stole the notes from Bob Monroe and took them to Doubleday. Said, "This will make a hell of a book," and brought back to Bob Monroe a contract that said, we can take and turn those notes of yours into a book, and they're willing to pay you to do it. Wow. And that turned out to be Journeys Out of the Body. Mm-hmm. So it was the very first popular book that described out-of-body experiences. And he wrote 3 books in general. And what I really appreciate about Bob Monroe was he was a pioneer in an area that had no definition. I mean, he grew up in Virginia. He's a Methodist. He doesn't know this from anything, but he's starting to explore the non-physical universe. And in his books, he's describing what he's discovering. And what I really like about him was, like in his second book, he'll say, "Remember what I told you in the first book? Nah, not quite. I have some more thoughts on that now. I think I've got it better." And then he does the same thing in the third book. He goes, "Remember what I told you in the second book? Nah, I have some refinements on that." And so he has this, it's not about dogma for him. For him, it's about exploring.
Humility.
And what can we find out? And how can we take and use that knowledge to better our understanding of the universe and of ourselves? And so what we know about the non-physical universe has continued to evolve in the 40 plus years of the Monroe Institute. What we know then versus what we know now, wow, it's hugely better. And I thought, back to Bruce Grayson. This is a little segue from before. He was telling me Bruce Grayson, NDE guy.
Yes.
He went to visit the Dalai Lama in, is it Darshan? I can't
Dharma,
remember.
Dharmashala or whatever.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where he lives in. Anyway, he went with a group of scientists, and it was a conversation between Buddhists and Western science and how they approach their work. And the Dalai Lama started off the conference by saying, you know, Western science and Buddhism approach the world in almost the exact same way because we are both about empirical observation. Buddhism isn't locked into its dogma. If we find out new information, we change. Just like science changes. We find out new information, there's a new theory. So the difference between the two is that Western science tends to find out about the physical universe so that it can manipulate and change it so that life is better. And he said Buddhists find out about the physical universe so they can learn how to live more harmoniously with the world as it is.
Mm-hmm.
We don't try to change it. And I thought that was lovely. And it turns out the people that had near-death experiences, when they come back, they start talking more like the Buddhists.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that they come back and say, we're all one thing. As humans, we're all interconnected. And what it's about is learning to live with each other and learning to live with our physical universe in a harmonious way. And I love that about the work. When you talk to near-death experiencers, there's that real heartfelt connection that they have with not only themselves but with other people.
Definitely interesting for sure. And there's just so many ways to look at it. And the journey, I guess my biggest question is like, if you do you have to keep coming here until you reach a certain level to ascend, so to speak? I guess I just keep wondering if it's forced and that they make you come back here until you reach a certain, level of attainment or something like that. I don't know if that's how it works, but I guess that's one of my biggest questions is figuring that out.
My sense is that no, that's not how it works. My understanding is different than that, is that you get to choose whether you want to come back and what lessons you want to learn. And when you're done learning what you want to learn, you can go and do something else.
Yeah.
What are you going to do next time, Scott?
Love more, laugh more.
Well, it's we got 4 minutes. It's been great having you on. Your site's what? neardeathmeditations.com.
Thank you. And at neardeathmeditations.com, you can find a couple of things that are of value. One is that series of albums that I've done that introduces you to the frequencies and the vibrations of a near-death experience so that you can go to the same places that near-death experiencers go to, only do it through meditation versus, having to have the physical trauma. Let's not do that. And the second thing is we teach a week-long meditation retreat where we do these exercises as a group, and we make that transition about 25 times. So by the end of the week, you really know what's going to happen at your eventual transition, and you know how it's going to look, you know how it's going to feel, you know what to expect, and it really takes away the fear of death. And that is an extraordinary gift to be able to say, at a soul level, this is something that is beautiful, it's easy, and I'm ready when the time comes.
Yeah.
And if we learn to live, if we learn to die well, You know, we learn to live well. We can live without that fear, and as soon as you drop that fear of dying, it's boy, does that make this life here in the physical world just so much more fun. And we just you get to live life and find it's full of joy, and you take more risks, and you become more of who you were meant to be. So it's one of those things that's the big gift of all of the research on near death experiences. It's not the phenomena. It's it's not the methodology, but it's the impact that it has here in the physical world that allows people to really be um, free. Yeah, it's about freedom and learning to enjoy life here.
That's a big one, is the fear of it all. And I've even seen, pretty much what happens, and I still deal with it myself, just the fear of it, the fear of croaking. But think interviews like this helps, and I hope it helps our listeners out there. I know it is, and we appreciate it so much. Thanks so much, Scott.
You are most welcome. Thank you, Jeffrey, for having me on the show. Thank you, Wham, for all your really lovely comments. It's made my time here easy. Wow, that was just flew by.
It goes fast. Our next guest next week is Evelyn Riesdeck, Shamanic Creativity. So that's going to be a good one for sure. And that's great. Keep us in the loop on any future projects. And thanks, everybody, for listening. You're listening to United Public Radio. And make sure you check out UFO Paranormal Radio, UFO Paranormal Radio. Everybody have a great weekend. And make sure you find out why Baby Yoda picked the Mandalorian over the Force with Luke Skywalker. You'd have to see it to believe it, but it's a big question for sure. Book of Boba Fett, that's the other Mandalorian spinoff show. They're both good, worth watching. Everyone have a good weekend. Thanks, everybody.
Bye bye. Good
Bye
night.
now.
Take care. Let's see, in broadcast.